if my motive is absolutely clean, absolutely pure, then that energy is reaching us and carrying us forward, and things move very beautifully. And very often, if it's my ego or if it's the influence of others, any other attachments that I may have that are pulling me, so it's more my desire rather than just that pure motive of service, then things can get stuck. And so in anything, really just beginning with silence and using that power that is available for us through silence, and just making sure that we keep that fire of God's love burning brightly in our hearts, things will definitely move forward. This is why when I look at the state of the world today, and I see that really it's just a question of re-education, that we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten the divine, we've forgotten our values, and so what we're doing is mixed up. But we just have to simply come. It sounds very simplistic, but I really believe it to be true, that if even a small group of committed individuals really make it their intention and follow it through in their lives to have that purity, then the world can change. And I believe it will, because I believe that goodness prevails. And so I see that beyond this period of chaos and turmoil, there's a world of harmony ahead of us. It has to be. Things will balance out and come to that. But we need to be the instruments to take that step of clearing out other stuff from our own hearts and minds. By the way, this isn't meant to be a Q&A. So please do share your thoughts and feelings and comments. My understanding and my experience tells me that the first level, when we start looking inside, that we notice other thoughts. Then you go a little bit deeper and you see the feelings. And then you go even deeper and you see your beliefs. And this then shapes your perception and your conscience. Then you go deeper and you see the imprints that you carry. So it's a journey going deeper and deeper. And where people talk about heart, in fact, this is just the pumping machine. That's what it's doing. You can change a heart from one to another. You can put in a monkey heart, you can put in a pig heart, you can do all sorts of things today, and the person is still alive. So this is basically a pumping machine. But it's the human being, the being that I am, the soul, that is actually experiencing everything. Now, say, for example, I experience love. It's the soul that has this experience, my thoughts, my feelings, and so on. But the impact of it is felt here, because from soul to brain and a quick reflex. And so we talk about the feelings or love and we point here, but in fact it's actually the trigger is here. And so when we're talking about cleaning the soul, and how the courage, the clarity, and all this comes from the process of cleansing, it's language. It's not this that I'm cleaning, it's this that I'm cleaning. The cleansing of this can happen with stents and all sorts of other things, but no, it's actually here. And so I think they're very deeply connected, but this is why we focus more on here. And the third eye, the eye of wisdom, has always been shown here. And you would have noticed that married women in India always have this little dot. And it's a symbol of marriage in India. But in fact, men and women, when they go to the temple in the morning, there would be sandalwood paste. and they would take some of the sandalwood paste and put it here. So that's men and women. So it's the reminder of the pure. Sandalwood is fragrant, it's golden, it's beautiful, it's cooling, and so you put some of that paste to remind you that this is who I am. And you're told, leave all your leather things outside, your leather shoes, even your camera case, if it's leather, they'll tell you leave it outside. Again, symbolic of leaving behind this skin, this leather, and coming into the sanctum, the sacred space where you can just experience the soul. But there's a lot of things that have got mixed up on the path of devotion. But Raj Yoga gives us a lot of clarity. But yes, those on the path of heartfulness are definitely using God's love to experience that process of cleansing.
I'm sorry, this is going to be also a Q&A.
We had a very interesting seminar here that was organized under the auspices of UNESCO, and the woman who organized it has worked with us, especially with those involved with Spirit of Humanity, very, very closely, Maureen and Joanna Sherto Gill. So she is now with UNESCO, and she organized a meeting in which the topic was looking at spiritual healing and the history of racism and slavery. And it's a very emotive subject. And we had a circle of about 14 people here, and we were meeting downstairs. And what they acknowledged, each one of them afterwards, was that because it was in a sacred space, and because of the atmosphere here, they could actually look at the subject more deeply and come to further understanding of what needs to happen in 3 days. Maybe it was 2.5. And what comes out first for me is the whole subject of inner dignity, and a woman of colour, and add the two together, and it's an uphill struggle and everything. But when I came to know who I am, and I am this inner being of light, in that awareness there was a dignity that came that allowed me to rise above, whether it was feminist attacks or whether it was racist attacks. And racism I can absolutely date to the Uganda crisis. Prior to that, it wasn't really there. Maybe undercover, but not overtly. But then, with the Uganda crisis, we had literally hundreds of thousands of people of colour coming to England, Britain. And racism became rampant. And that was when I experienced it for the first time. But it was the inner dignity that spirituality gives you, that I'm not this, I'm this. And that allowed me to go above it and be able to contain my inner peace and calm and clarity and compassion without stepping back into something that's happening on this level. Something happens on this level, I react on that level, and it's back and forth, action, reaction, and it's infinite. But if I'm able to rise above it with spiritual awareness, with help from the divine, then maybe I can contribute in a different way to bringing peace and calm. And I see that that is the missing factor, the spiritual component. The spiritual component that can heal me of the wrongdoings, not just to me, but colonialism and the history of that. It's quite a story. And it's interesting that in India, not just the story of colonialism, but even after that, right through the 50s and 60s and 70s, that history continued through the political system. It's a long subject, but something that I've been looking into. And yes, the political factors in India, never mind the rest of the world, contributed to still creating that consciousness of inferiority. And the remedy is education, spiritual education. And of course, if values education can be brought into it within the curriculum, it would make such a huge difference. But India adopted the path of secular education, and today they are regretting it hugely because it really hasn't proved to be the success that it was meant to be. So I think that the first step is to allow individuals to come back to their dignity. And there was a big conference I think it was in Durban, and it's very interesting because I had a ticket in my hand. I was supposed to go to South Africa, and I'd been going to South Africa many times during apartheid era also. And I changed my passport from an Indian one to a British one so that I could go, because Indian passport didn't allow you to go to South Africa from the side of the Indian government because of apartheid. So I'd gone there many times, but this was now a conference in 2001. And the morning that I was here, my mother had departed, she'd flown away. So I headed back to London where she was, and I had to phone them and say, no, I'm not coming to the conference, I have to be here. But in that conference, Dadi Janki spoke about it afterwards. She hadn't been there, but she spoke about it afterwards. And she said, if there's the consciousness still of taking reparations, there'll always be the consciousness of bondage. And so, no, let there be the dignity of my own culture, of my own ancestry, and rise above the question of reparation, and then I can come to some sort of level of equality. And so, a short answer to a very intense question, but really the essence is to come back to the awareness of the self and the dignity of that. The values program of education. I remember Neil used to come for meditation here at that time, and UNICEF invited us to a program in New York, and I get a call from our sister in New York saying, I've been asked by the UNICEF to bring 12 educators to New York to see what we can do. And Neil Hawkes was one of those people. And Cyril Dallé was the chief of programming at that time, a man from Mauritius. And he said, we've got to train all the different units of UNICEF all over the world, but you have the engine. Because at that time we had written a book dedicated to the 50th anniversary of the UN, which was called Living Values. And that contained a summary of values that were universal in their definition. And the UN had said, when we said to them, this is what we'd like to do, they'd said, whose values? And we said, universal values. They said, there's no such thing. We said, okay, if we show you a draft, will you have a look at it? They did. And it carried the UN logo for the 50 years anniversary. And so UNICEF asked us to produce books. And within 3 months, a set of books for using living values in schools had been produced. And within a year, the project had reached many countries. And then the group that was doing this came to Dadi Janki. Again, here Oxford played a major role. And they said, the values are universal, but they carry the name of the Brahma Kumaris. Are you willing to let go of the property, which is actually universal, and not have the name of Brahma Kumaris because it carries the label of Hinduism, Brahma. And so Daddy thought for a moment and said, that's fine, it's a gift for the world. And so the name of the Brahma Kumaris was removed as the creation of that. And so that's the story of Living Values and Neil Hawkes. Living Values then became an international association founded in Switzerland under the name ALIVE, Association of Living Values Education. And so ALIVE is well and functioning across the world in many countries. If you look it up on the websites, you'll see it. But again, Daddy's total humility at that time. Remove the name. We don't need to have the name. It's a gift for the world. This was we started one project in 1988, and that led to Living Values, which would have been in 95. The values came from not just our own thinking, but we reached out to 66 countries in which we asked people, what are the most important values in your country? And the first 10 were the same, universal. The last two we had to then choose by majority, but the first 10 were the same.
And is it as strong today as it was then?
It is in most countries, but Neil Hawkes is still very much connected, and they wanted to have a Living Values training here, and I'm not sure whether it's now this year or next year.
I think it's going to be next year.
It's probably next year, because it got booked out here. In Greece, there is a couple, and Vicky and I've forgotten her husband's name, but they manage the Living Values. If you speak to Drusilla, she'll put you in touch with them. It's there. It's there. What happens is that things that are very externalized and commercialized are known, and things that are quietly happening, people who look for them find them. In Israel, I think Living Values is still alive, right? Not so much. Okay. Here we found that it wasn't possible to get into the system, and it depended on individual heads or teachers and so on. So it never became an overall scheme. It's like yesterday I was talking about the peace campaign, and again it's one person who, Jim Dees, the headmaster at one of the schools in Harrow, who said, I want to do this, because he himself is a meditator. And so they moved it forward with a young woman who's from Hong Kong actually, but living here now. And she worked a lot with people from Grenfell. She was one of the teachers who received a phone call, there's a fire, and she went across to help, and she continued to help the remaining children and the parents who bereaved and so on. She continued to serve them for about a year, and then brought whoever wanted to come to our home in London, Global House, and it was a very sweet gathering there. So individuals continue this work without government saying, yes, this is good, we support it. When governments say that, it'll be time to go to the golden age.